Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. Last time on the old Axial Honcho, we rewired the old front lights and connected up and fitted a pair of rather fancy 3D printed rears. When we put some power on them, they worked a treat, so this week we're going to swap out the receiver and fit a mini light controller. When it's working, we'll pop out to the woods and have a play. Right, the first little job is removing the battery tray which covers up the radio box. At the front there's a long screw that goes through a spacer. We're going to undo them but not remove them. At the rear there's a short screw that needs to be removed so we can swing the metal plate around. Now we've got access to the last two screws, remove them and the spacer and the whole tray comes away. I've always thought Axial's front mounted battery was a bit of a bodge. At the rear it works a treat, but it really does get in the way when it's mounted over the electronics box. Next we can remove the two screws that hold the lid on the box. It's not watertight, so there's no O-rings to worry about, but the lid is a good snug fit. That just leaves pulling out the old receiver and disconnecting the steering and the throttle. Now we've got a bit of a blank canvas to play with. The light controller is designed to sit on the flat space on top of a 3-channel FlySky receiver. There's a little bit of an overhang, but not much. To keep it in place, we're just going to use a bit of servo tape. Couldn't be easier really. There's only two connections to make. The full-size 3-pin connector goes to channel 2, just like the ESC normally would. The single wire connects up to channel 3, so we can turn the lights on and off. It just wants to connect up to the signal pin. But if it's accidentally connected to one of the others, it's not going to blow up. The board will just flash its onboard light to tell you something's wrong. When it's all plugged in, it really doesn't take much more space than the receiver on its own, especially useful for the small 1/16 scale trucks. So the wires from the connector that connect up the body can reach the electronics box. We're going to need to extend them a little bit. There's not a vast amount of current here, so we're just going to use some basic equipment wire. I've not got any red handy, so we'll just have to use some pink. It'll be close enough. We want the wires soldered together first so we can work out how long they need to be. With the body on the chassis, we can roughly see where the connector wants to sit, so all the wiring's going to sit nice and safely and not get chewed up by the spur gear. Then we just run the wires up and over to the controller board, add an extra ½ an inch or so, and cut the wires. Axial includes some rather nice wire clips along the side of the chassis. They're really designed to keep the battery wires safe when the battery's mounted at the rear, but for this setup they're going to work a treat to keep the lighting wires nice and safe. They're way too loose at the moment though, so we need to beef them up with some heat shrink so they're a good tight fit. And while we're heat shrinking, we need to insulate all the solder joints too. And here we go then, one cable ready to fit to the chassis. The two beefed up bits are a nice snug fit in the clips now, so they're not going to move when plugging in the body. Towards the front there's another bit of heat shrink to protect the wires, so we can zip tie it to one of the cross members. That way when we open up the electronics box later, all the wires shouldn't try and spring out, which will make our life much easier. To connect it all up to the light controller, all we do is solder the wires to the pads on the PCB. It's a bit hard to see in the video, so here's a render of the board. The first pad is positive. This will go to the pink wire that ends up connecting to all the LED anodes in the body. Then we've got HL, which connects to the headlight cathodes, TL, the tail light cathodes, and RV, which is the reverse light cathodes. The three other pads we'll come to when we've got the front spotlights ready to wire up. Now when I wired up the first set of lights on the Honcho, I wired up the spots to a 4-pin connector. The two centre pins are the anodes, so positive, and the outside two are the cathodes. So with a simple 4-pin socket and some wire, we've got a cable to connect up to the controller. The pink wire connects to the centre pins, so that will be positive, and the two grey wires to the cathodes, one for each of the spotlights. It doesn't really matter which way round the two cathodes connect, so it's fine having them both the same colour. I've popped on some heat shrink to keep it insulated and safe, so all we need to do is twist up the wires so they stay neatly together. Zip tie it to the chassis so the wires can't get in the way of the steering servo, remembering it's axle mounted so that servo is going to move around quite a bit. Next we can solder the wires to the controller, pink to positive, and the grey wires to A1 and A2, which is short for accessory 1 and 2. They have different functions depending on which function table is selected, so there's a setup that will suit most models. That just leaves the antenna and the last of the connectors. We could probably get away with leaving the antenna in a box, but it's going to work far better stood up and kept safe in some antenna tube. The steering servo plugs back into channel 1 on the receiver, and the final connection is to connect the ESC to the light controller. Surprisingly, the bundle of wires just about fits through the hole in the box. I was expecting to have to open it up a bit. We can put it all back together now. We've got the 2 small screws that hold the lid on the box. Next is the 2 screws and spacer that hold the battery tray mount to the chassis. And lastly, there's the short screw that holds the tray to its mount. Very tidy. That would be the end of the upgrades, but I've been busy with the 3D printer again, and I found a pair of front arch liners on Thingiverse and thought I'd give them a go. They're really simple to mount. All we do is remove the top damper screw, line up the liner with a hole, reinstall the screw, and add a second one just to stop it from rotating. It's a really simple and neat design. Hopefully it'll keep some of the splashes off the chassis to make the cleanup that bit easier. I've mounted the ESC switch to the liner too, so it should be nice and easy to reach from under the chassis, but not get caught up on anything when we're out running. When we put the body onto the chassis, we now need to remember to connect up the 4-pin light connector too. Now this is an early SCX10, so there's no spur gear cover. We really need to make sure the wires can't find their way into the gears. And that would be the last thing, except I've got another set of AU Star, or Oster, wheels and tyres. These ones are bought for £11. The tyres are nice and soft with their foam inserts, with a slightly denser tread pattern than the old Proline flat irons. Since the plastic wheels that come with these tyres are the glue-on type, I'm just going to swap the tyres onto the axial wheels. Saves gluing them, so we can always swap them around later. They do look pretty good on the truck, but we're going to have to actually test them outside to see if they're any good. The plastic wheels are probably going to come in useful at some point. With a nice chrome ring, they're going to look good on some sort of on-road car. So that's about it. I'm going to leave you with a little bit of a test run with the TRX4 for company. The old SCX10 is a much simpler layout, but the relatively low weight sure helps. There's no real flow to the clips, but there's a fair amount of falling over, so it should be fun. Right, queue up your iTunes because I'm signing off. Thanks for watching, like if you liked, subscribe if you haven't, not forgetting that little bell button, and leave a comment if you've got something on your mind. Bye guys!